anyway. There's some missionaries that we support. It is Aaron and Shannon DePue and their family. And we're going to do this a little bit different style. We're going to do an interview more than necessarily a sermon. But Aaron, Shannon, you guys come on to the stage and just, you all stay seated and we're going to get seated. So give us just a minute here. We'll put you two over here by each other because you look like you're fond of each other.
Let me move the mic then.
And I'll get right over here. And I'll get off the cord.
20 and 18.
You can get those in your hand if you need to, just whatever you are most comfortable with. So, how many of you know this couple? This is Aaron and Shannon DePue. And Aaron, you know a little bit. I've been around here for almost 2 years. You probably know more about this building and these people than I do, huh? Tell me about your connection, your all's connection to First Church.
Absolutely. So I definitely know a lot about this building because I grew up in this church. So I spent a lot of time when my parents were doing things here. I was playing, so I've been like all back in here and all this baptistry stuff. So I know pretty much every little nook and cranny of the church.
Hey,
but
is there a safe room here somewhere? Because I'm convinced that I'm going to push some button somewhere and this door is going to open that I've not seen
there
yet.
could be.
There could be. Okay. Okay.
I'm not going to say, but yeah. So I grew up in this church. Honestly, it's the only church I can remember from the time I was born until I was 18 years old, and so literally learned everything I know. Became a Christian right here at this church, and so yeah, I consider this my home church for sure.
Good deal. Good deal. And somewhere along the way, you met this lovely lady.
Yeah. So after I graduated from high school, I went to Athens High School, but I graduated from Pikeview. I was the first class of Pikeview High School, and so I went to West Virginia University, and I met my wife, my beautiful wife Shannon, in Morgantown.
And he brought home a Yankee.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. She said she was from West Virginia. She was from the real West Virginia too, in Preston County is where she lived. I'm like, honey, Preston County, Morgantown's not the real West Virginia. So I brought her down here and showed her what West Virginia really was all about.
Good deal. Good deal. Now, you guys have 3 kids, correct?
We do. We have Isabella, our oldest, who is 17. And part of our summer here, we're here for 6 weeks visiting. And part of that 6 weeks, we're looking at colleges, which is pretty crazy to believe. So.
Wow.
So Isabella, she's 17. Blaine, our son, he's 16. And then Ava Lynn, I always forget how old she is, but I remember today she's 14. So.
All right.
She's 13.
Oh, there we go. 13. She'll be 14.
She's 13 going on 14. Okay,
Yeah.
we got it. We got it. And of course, your parents are
Yeah, my parents are Sam and Donna DePue. So I think we're happy to be able to visit with them. We've been visiting with them since last Thursday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a great visit.
And I know they're glad to have you guys here. You're not spoiling those grandkids, are you? Not at all. Not at all. All right. So you all are missionaries to Hungary. What does your ministry look like in that part of the world?
Yeah, so we're with One Mission Society. That's our organization. It's one of the largest mission boards in America. And so in Hungary, we work together, and our title is Business as Missions Coordinators. And when we first went to Hungary almost 2 years ago, we pretty much were just going to be working in Budapest and only in Hungary. But we got promoted, so now we cover all of Europe and the Middle East. So we have business as missions projects right now in Spain, Ireland, Estonia, and of course Hungary.
The second thing that we do that I mentioned to the pastor this morning, if any of you have been on a missions trip before, when you go, you have this idea or this description of what you're supposed to do when you get there. But God's really funny in that when you get there, what you end up doing is usually not the thing you thought you were going to go to do. And so that's definitely been true with us. We are doing the thing we thought, working in businesses missions and establishing a preschool in Budapest. But the other things that God has brought onto our plate, one of the other things is working in leadership in our mission community. I hate admitting it, but we are among the elders of our team there in Hungary. And so we have a large group of missionaries that work with our team that are in their 20s. And so one of the things that has happened is we've been put into a position of leadership within our team. I serve as the chairperson for our field committee that runs the operations in Hungary. And so we've spent a lot of time this last 2 years pouring into our team and discipling the younger missionaries that we work with. The last thing is that just the day-to-day ministry that happens in Hungary, we have team members that are planning those activities, but Aaron and I have the pleasure of working in a lot of those areas. We do things, for example, right before we came, we took part in a children's camp in a rural part of Hungary. So our organization does children's ministry and works within camps and English ministries all year long, and so we've been able to participate in those this year, mostly online, but we were actually able to do an in-person camp before we left to come back. We have a discipleship ministry, which we're able to help some with, which is training pastors and starting discipleship groups in churches. And Aaron actually was able to build a greenhouse this year in one of our community impact programs where we're working in rural communities to establish things like food production and those types of things.
Good deal. You guys got quite a bit going on over there. That is wonderful. So roughly, how far is Hungary from good old West Virginia?
I like to say it's about as far as you can get. But I don't know, like probably 6,000 miles. Yeah.
Wow. So how did you know God was calling you 6,000 miles on the other side of the world?
I like to say it was definitely a process, a very long process for us. When we first did international missions, we had a summer. Aaron was working in full-time ministry in a school for the first time, and he was going to have his summer off. And that's how we ended up going the first year, is because he looked at me one day and said, you know, I'm just feeling like God's asking us to do something with this time that we're going to have this summer. And we owned our own business. That's what I did. And so we had the ability. And so really, we say Hungary chose us at that point. The first time we went, when we contacted the mission agency, it was the only place that they had for our family to go. And through several things that God did, we felt really confirmed that that was the right place for us. And that was in 2015, the first time that we went there. And we came back. God very much changed us in that process. The second year, we went back again for another 6 weeks for the summer. And when we came back from that trip, God really started to speak to us and make connections for us in our hearts about what was happening in Hungary, and really more inviting us, we felt like, to be a part of the ministry there. And for us, that was really confusing, because we are in the middle of our lives. We're 40-something. We have teenage kids. We owned a business. We were well established in our church in Morgantown. And it didn't really seem like the best time to pick up and move our family across the world. But as God began to speak to each one of us individually, we all knew that it wasn't a question of was he calling us to go, but were we willing to leave behind all of those things and all of those roots and pick up and move.
Wow. So that is, you got the definite call from God, and when you hear that, you want to respond accordingly. But what's that been like for your kids?
Yeah, so like Shannon said, it's not often, even in missionary organizations, that 40-year-old people with teenagers go to the mission field. It's usually little kids. So when we were going through the training at One Mission Society, they literally had nothing for our kids. They had like a playroom with a bunch of little baby toys in it, and our kids are like, what do we do with this? So I think the lady just took them out to Chick-fil-A every day.
Yeah.
That was good. So they liked that.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So actually, because of our familiarity with Hungary and Budapest and the ministry that they do there from just the 2 short-term trips that we did, our kids have been on board from day one. And when we decided, when Shannon and I, felt called and decided that this was something we were going to do full time, Isabella literally said, "It's about time, guys," because they were feeling also the call. And we look at it like it's not only just Shannon and I that are called to full-time ministry in Hungary; it's our whole family, And we've been very blessed too with a great community, a missionary community in Budapest, and a great school. So our kids attend the International Christian School of Budapest, and it's an English school, and it would look like any Christian school in America, as far as is the curriculum and those things. But then when you look a little deeper, you notice that the kids are from all over the world, and the teaching's in English. Most of the teachers are Americans, but I mean they have friends from Albania, China. I mean, it's amazing just the diversity within their school.
Good deal. Quite an opportunity you guys have.
And they make good grades too. They've done really well, all of them. So Isabella made the honor roll this year. Blaine was close. Evelyn almost had straight A's, so they're doing very well.
Okay.
And that's even doing the distance learning and all that crazy stuff. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's been craziness for schools everywhere, I'm sure. So tell me a little bit about Hungary. Like if I was over there, could I just look out and see all these rolling hills and then maybe cut down to Tudor's somewhere and get me some biscuits and a pepperoni roll somewhere maybe? Is that what it's like over there?
It's not exactly like that. I think some of the biggest differences between Hungary and here, and the one that I always talk about is like Shannon and I are country people. I mean, I grew up in Athens. She grew up in Preston County, and we lived in Morgantown, which is a pretty small town. And right now we live in the middle of the 13th largest city in Europe. I mean, we live right in the middle of the city. So I think one of the ways I judge how country you are is how far Starbucks is, right? I don't know if you guys ever think like that. So I mean, where we live, we can walk within 5 minutes to 3 different Starbucks. So it's pretty urban.
Okay.
I think culturally speaking, there are several things that are really different. First of all is the language barrier. They speak Hungarian in Hungary. It's technically one of the most difficult languages to learn on the planet. Of course, we went to that country that is the most difficult to learn. We've worked really, really hard on language school. We feel like it's really important that we're able to communicate there. And so that's probably been one of the most different things. I think another thing that's really different in Hungary is just the pace of life. So I think as Americans, we think about you live in a big city and it would be very fast-paced and a lot of hustle and bustle, but that's not the case. Culturally speaking, in Hungary, the pace of life is much slower. And so everything takes longer to get done. So we've grown accustomed, I think, to liking that things are slower. A great example is if you make a dinner reservation in Hungary, it's either you can choose between 2 up to 4 hours for your dinner reservation. So people like to sit, they like to sit in a coffee shop, they want to get to know you. Everything about it is much slower. And we've grown to like that part of it. But the flip side is that it's really hard to get things done because no one is in a hurry to do anything.
And the bureaucracy there is just insane. I mean, there's an office for everything. Wow. And you never go to the right one. So it's always like, well, you need to go to that one, and then you go to the next one, and then they send you back, and yeah, it's crazy.
Well, that's why everything's so laid back. You're going to spend a lot of your time going through the offices, huh?
That's right.
So what would be some of maybe the misconceptions that folks in the States have about missions?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest misconception I have, and probably a lot of you guys have also, is like, I thought as an American Christian I have all the answers, right? Like, I'm from the greatest nation, and it's the 4th of July. I mean, it's America, right?
Amen, yeah.
So we're the greatest nation in the world. We have all the answers, and then you go over there and you realize that they have their own way of doing things, and it's not our way. It's completely different, but they still get things done. So, I think a lot of times it's hard, like, you think you can speak into something just because of your experience, but the fact is their culture, it's. We actually were visiting in Williamsburg, Virginia, a couple weeks ago, or a week ago, and we drove past this place, and Shannon's mom was like, "Oh man, that's like 300 years old." Well, where we live, some of the houses around where we live are 300 years old,
Oh, wow.
So it's like they have 1,000-year Christian heritage in Hungary. And so, but the reality is people they don't know what it means to be a Christian. They just think, oh, I'm Hungarian, I'm Christian, right? I was born one. And they don't understand the whole personal relationship with God thing. And so you just have to be careful, and as an American, to not run in there and think that have all the answers, because you really don't. And you have to understand that they've been doing it for a long time too. They just need a little bit of help and support. So that's what we provide.
I think one of the other things, I think people have the vision that as missionaries, you stand on a corner in the city and just hand out tracts all day. That's basically what you do. And that's really not the case. I think a lot of people here in America know that that's not a very effective way most often to reach people for Christ. And it's not effective there either. What's more impactful there is getting to know people, building relationships with them, bringing them into your community, to have that ability to speak into their life and to be able to get to know them well. And so all of the efforts that we do in ministry there revolve around that. It revolves around building relationships with people and bringing them to know Christ. I think the other thing that always strikes me too is people treat us differently. We spent most of our lives working in business and being a part of a church and in leadership. But when we became missionaries and had that title, people look at you differently, and they I think like pastors as well, sometimes they put you on a pedestal that you're different. And we're not. We are exactly the same as what we've always been in Christ. The difference is just that God called us to be in a different location and to work in a different capacity. It's not a higher calling. It's not a better calling than what anyone in this church has. It just looks different. And what He's asked us to do and invited us to do looks different than most of the people that we know.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I remember sitting out there where you guys are, and missionaries would come here, and most of the time they're pastors and teachers, and they have churches. And I thought, oh man, you can't be a missionary unless you're a pastor. But that's another huge misconception. It's not true. I mean, God equips the church with tons of different giftings, right? And you guys use them here. I mean, everyone in this church congregation has a different gift, and God can use that. Well, the mission field's no different. Yeah, we need pastors in Hungary, but we need business people. I mean, right now, I need accountants. I wish I had an accountant and an attorney that knew international law in Hungary. That would be nice too. But yeah, God can use your skills no matter what.
Good deal. So what are some of the spiritual struggles that are going on in Hungary?
I think for us personally, one of the biggest struggles has been isolation. And honestly, in the tail end of a pandemic here in America and worldwide, I think that's been a struggle for everybody. Being isolated from other people. For us, it was, I think as a missionary, it's typical to feel isolation when you first move and you're in this unfamiliar place and you can't read the signs and you can't communicate with people. That's difficult enough. But COVID definitely compounded that for us. And it created barriers that we physically couldn't get to know people and build community. And again, I think the same thing has happened right here in your community, where being separated from people physically is hard and it's difficult. I think it opens doors for God to work in you, but it's hard being isolated from people. I think as a culture in Hungary, as Aaron kind of alluded to as well, I think one of the struggles that we face there is that people have a knowledge of Christianity. A lot of people grow up in the Catholic Church or in the Reformed Church, but it's a very legalistic view of who God is. And so most people don't understand or have any idea for the concept of having a personal relationship with Christ. And so when we talk about that, they're sometimes very confused because they don't understand that that's the basis for having a relationship with Christ. And so that's been a really hard barrier for us to break through, because people think they know what Christianity is, but they really don't understand it.
Yeah, and even, as we talk to other people all over Europe, like those established churches, they really don't look at evangelical Christians like us in a very positive light. In fact, a lot of places they think we're in a cult. We think we're a cult. So that's why the relationship is so important with people, is building. You have to build these relationships with people just so they don't know you're crazy, because that's really what they think coming into it. So,
How long have you all been on the mission field?
We've been there for a year and a half, pretty much.
Yeah, it'll be 2 years in August when we get back. It'll
2
be
years in August.
So you just got there and the world went nuts with having to isolate and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So you lead a team. You're part of a team of missionaries there. How are you and your team currently working to impact the community?
As we've already said a couple of times, for us, it's really about building relationships with individuals to bring them into the church, and also building relationships with the church in Hungary. So as Aaron said, we sometimes think that we have all the answers and we know how to do things, but culturally speaking, they do things very differently. And so the truth is that the Christian church in Hungary is better equipped to meet the needs of its own people. What they do need, though, is for us to come alongside them. And so a lot of our ministries focus on empowering the churches there. For example, our discipleship materials, we have Hungarian translated materials for a discipleship program. It's pretty simple instructions on how to form a small group and how to disciple those in your circle. And so one of the things that we do is we work with the church. We work with the Methodist Church. What are some of the other churches?
Yeah, we work with, of course, the Methodist Church is probably the largest denomination in Hungary, but then we work with other missions organizations too. And it's interesting, I remember when I first told my parents that I was going to Hungary as a missionary, that Mom was like, well, the Church of God has a missionary in Hungary. And I'm like, and she's like, do you know him? I'm like, Mom, there's 3 million people in Hungary. So I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to meet him. But again, in only ways that God can connect people. A family at the school needed help with their registration on their car. And so our field director helped him get a new license plate for his car, and it was the First Church of God missionary in Hungary.
Oh, wow.
And then he became part of our small group, and really is, I meet with him like once a week. His name is Daniel Kim. And and it's really interesting, just the connections. So he went to school with Todd Faulkner, and his wife actually was commenting on Buddy Barber's, when your mom passed away, I reckon she knows your family. So it's Daniel and Christy Kim are their names.
All right.
So it's a small world.
It is a very small world, even in 3 million people.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge part. That's a big part is, partnering together across denomination to be able to reach people for Christ. And so, that's always the ultimate goal, is to build those relationships, bring people to know Christ, and then work with the churches to disciple those people. A huge part of our ministry that we focus on is bringing kids to know Christ. As we know here, if you can reach children at a young age and plant those seeds early, you're going to have a huge impact by doing that, and often even impact their entire family. And so that's a huge part of what we do. In Hungary, people really want to learn the English language, and they want to learn it from native English speakers. And so you can become very popular. People want to get to know you because you're a native English speaker. And so we use that to leverage ourselves to build relationships in the community. We do English camps. In fact, this summer we're able to do camps again in person. And so tomorrow, our team that we lead will be starting their first, well, it's the second English camp for the summer. I went to the first one. They'll be leading one of those camps this week, and they have one pretty much every other week for the rest of the summer. So that's a really important part. And what we do with those kids then is we do a year-round program where we work with them. We also try to plug them into our partner church so that they're part of a youth group, they're part of a live and functioning church as well. Of course, we're working on opening the preschool, which will function in a similar way. We'll actually be teaching from a Christian curriculum in that preschool, but then also trying to connect those families back to the church to disciple them as well.
Good deal. What are some of the greatest needs of both believers and non-believers in Hungary?
I think that as far as needs goes for believers, they, like they said, they just need support. They need, they're used to, churches where you just go and you just do what, you just go through the worship and then you go home and then you don't think about it again. So, people, when they first believe and they get saved, they don't have anyone really pouring into them and explaining to them and discipling them. So they need that, and that's across the board. Even we're part of one of the largest churches in Budapest, and we talked with the pastor about discipleship, and he was like, "Oh, we do that," and I'm like, well, not to the way that we do it in America, which doesn't mean it's wrong, but they don't really have programs of discipleship, and they don't have ways to connect, believers to each other so that we can build one another up. So I think that's probably the biggest need, of the believers. And then, for unbelievers, we need workers to reach them, and we need people that can get into the community and establish businesses. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're trying to establish businesses because we can meet people in our business that we would never meet in a church. People will come and see there's going to be people come to the preschool in Budapest that will have probably never set foot inside of a church, that we're going to be able to minister to their kids 5 days a week for 8 hours a day, and we'll get to see them every day. So,
what type of businesses do y'all represent in Hungary? What type of businesses?
well, right now it's the preschool that's what we're working on, and so.
As he mentioned, in some of the other countries, one in Ireland, they're working on setting up like a coffee cart, a coffee shop type situation so that they can, meet people on the street that they, again, wouldn't have connections to. In Italy right now, they have a bike shop where they bring in refugees that are coming into southern Italy, and they teach them the skill. They let them work on the bike, and then they can keep the bike. In Estonia, it's actually a seminary that is established there through One Mission Society, and so we're working with them to set up a business as missions class to be taught in the seminary.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is we're breaking new ground because One Mission Society's never done business as missions, and so they look at us as the experts, which is pretty funny, really. But I mean, I feel like we have the experience that we need, and we have a track record with owning our own business. It was very successful. And so, yeah, we're sort of breaking new ground, but we're always open to new opportunities. In fact, I actually just put out a couple job descriptions on the One Mission Society site just for people interested in business as missions. So, I mean, if you live here and you feel called to missions and you have a construction company or you're a computer programmer, you can absolutely come to Hungary, and we can use those skills. We can develop, opportunities for you to come and do what you know how to do, but also serve.
So if Herbst Construction wanted to put an outlet over in Hungary, you can go to the website, Claude.
We're actually hoping to purchase our building. Our organization has been doing the fundraising, and we're ready to purchase our building for the preschool, and it's going to need a lot of work. So we need a lot of people coming to help with that. We also, the camp that is in Spain, they've had it. It's been in operation for 40 years.
Yeah.
And it needs some TLC. We need some
We need a
painting.
gardener.
We need a
We
gardener.
need a full-time gardener.
We need a lot of help as well in Spain at the camp. So there's a lot of opportunity for all trades.
But suppose folks didn't necessarily feel called to go and stay. Do you guys have opportunities like for missions teams to come?
Absolutely. The last, of course, year and a half, no one's been able to come. But as things open up, and hopefully, we already have had some interns come this summer. So over the next couple over the next year, things are going to start to open up, and we're going to have a ton of opportunities for people to come and serve on short-term mission trips. And in fact, we went to Crosspoint Church for 3 years. And so we spoke there last Sunday, and they're really excited about sending teams. So I could envision, hopefully, maybe even like a regional Church of God team coming, and doing either helping with our camps, and that would be youth ministry, or we're going to need work teams that know how to. We're going to need some people who know how to plaster, which is old school. So or if you want to learn to plaster, you can come to Hungary. So there's there's already a ton of opportunity for work teams and teams with the camps.
Do you have any openings for like short term on the demolition side? Because I can demolish, I just can't construct.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. The demolition, we need those people too.
Have you seen God at work through your ministry in these last couple of years?
I think definitely the first thing I want to give God credit for is just keeping our family safe during this whole pandemic. And that was one of my prayers the whole time. And I know many of you were also praying for us. Number one, I didn't want to get COVID in a foreign country. Number two, I definitely didn't want to go to a hospital there. And so the Lord protected us. Actually, the Lord opened a door where Shannon and I were able to be vaccinated in Hungary. And that was at a time when they weren't vaccinating foreigners. So we were very blessed and able to get our vaccines there. As far as our work goes, during this pandemic, our One Mission Society, their development team took our preschool project and just went 100% with it. And so our total project for our preschool is we need $1.6 million. Our development team has raised half that in the last year and a half. And so they have a matching campaign right now, and so they're looking at having the total $1.6 million by the end of next year.
Wow.
So, and our opening date will be 2013, the fall of 2013. 2023.
Yeah. Okay.
It's been really cool to see, as many of you probably experienced during COVID and lockdowns, our situation in Hungary was very different, so it was magnified. The government was very serious in a lot of Europe. So when they said things were closing, they meant things closed. There were periods of time where we really could only leave our apartment to get groceries, and that was really the only reason to be outside of your house. Or they would, you could walk your dog, were really the only two allowances for even leaving where you lived. And so those periods there extended through this entire last year for us. It wasn't just that initial time when COVID became an issue. And so for us, we spent a lot of time, more time than we've ever spent in our home during this last year. Our kids did distance learning for the majority of that time as well and went back to school. The high school was actually closed until the middle of May. So they spent almost the entire year in distance learning. And so during that time, when we felt like we couldn't do the things we would normally do, we couldn't do some of the ministries in person, we couldn't do the English clubs, we had to be really creative about how to do ministry during that time. like you did here. And a lot of things became online. A lot of things we were able to change. But the best part, I think, and what we've seen God doing is continuing to move when we were unable. And, you know, it's funny, I think last year I spoke about the scripture that his strength is made perfect in my weakness. And it's funny that sometimes God gives you that scripture before the season when you're really going to need it. And I think that this year for us, in our weakness, we got to see God continue to move and do things like raising $1 million during a pandemic when no one had any money to give. And so for us, the coolest part has been seeing how God has laid out those things in those steps, even when we can take no credit for what he was doing. And so it's been amazing to sit back and watch that process continue to move forward.
Good deal. So what has been the biggest blessing for you and your family since you've started on this venture?
I mean, I think just staying healthy, being able to, I mean, we spent a ton of time as a family, you know, and so our kids are getting older. Isabel's getting ready to go to college, and she'll be leaving, coming back here. So we were able to really spend a lot of time with her. I don't know, hopefully she liked it as much as we did. But, you know, being able to disciple our team, like Shannon had mentioned, our team is made up of mostly 20-something-year-old girls, you know, and they're all single. And so Shannon really took a lot of those girls under her wing and was able to pour into them. You know, we have a couple guys on our team I'd mentioned, you know, I really was able just to, you know, take them under my wing too, and because it was hard for everybody. So it was just a great time to sort of pour into each other, build each other up spiritually. And I feel like we're equipped now that things are start opening. We're stronger, we're better than ever, and ready to go and make disciples. So
Good deal. You highlighted some of it, but are there any other challenges? What would you say is your biggest challenge or your top challenges since you started? The pandemic, obviously, nobody wants to start something like this and be quarantined through most of it, but any other challenges?
I think I mentioned the isolation, I think was one of the biggest challenges for us there. I think that pushing past that, I think one thing that really stands out to me is, you know, when you pick up and you move there, and we really left everything all at the same time. And so there's a lot of loss in that. There's a lot of mourning and grieving over leaving things behind. And in a typical situation, you move into starting a new life. But for us, that was kind of postponed because we didn't have the ability to necessarily do that. And so I think that it was just a lot of growing in depth with God during that season of feeling kind of in the middle and not feeling like we necessarily had a place, I think was the biggest challenge, but I think also then turns into a blessing, seeing how God provided in all of those situations.
And, you know, it was hard being there and like having, you know, my parents here because they were just as isolated as what we were. And, you know, thank God for FaceTime as we were able to, you know, just talk with them and see them. So.
Good deal. Well, this congregation, you have strong connections here. You got roots that go way back here. And this congregation supports you financially and especially with our prayers. How can we best be praying for you at this point?
Absolutely. I do. I just want to thank you guys so much for supporting us. And like I said, we need financial support, but man, we needed a lot of prayer this time also. So thank you for each one of you guys. I would say that we need prayer just for our ministry and our projects that we're working on, and it seems like things are starting to stack up, and it's going to be difficult to go from basically not being able to do anything to a full schedule, and just sort of getting used to managing that again. So pray for that. Pray for our kids. They haven't had a normal year of school since they've lived in Hungary. And so this year, with God willing, hopefully, they'll be able to have a real year of school, and it'll be Izzy's senior year. And I pray that she'll be able to have all those fun things that seniors can do, you know?
I think as a mom, staying with Izzy as we're looking for colleges, she's going to be leaving and coming back to the U.S. next year. And so that's going to be a whole new season for our family for sure. And at the same time, Aaron is actually going back to school this fall and is going to be working at Central European University to get his master's in business administration. We think it's really going to be an amazing opportunity again for him to be part of a community that we would never have the ability to connect with in any other way. And it will also give him a lot of experience working in, European law and things like that as we're establishing these businesses. And I think going forward, it will give him a lot of education and discernment as we move forward in the projects across Europe as well.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, we are blessed to partner with you. We are honored to get to do this. And in just a moment, Soul Sisters are going to come back and sing a closing song. And during that time, I want to ask you and your family, if you would, just come down here, and we want to pray over you. During this time, if you want to gather around as we pray for them, you're welcome to do so. If you have any other need that you would like to pray about around these altars, you'll be welcome to come and do so. But we are thrilled again that you guys share some of this time with us on your trip in. I know a couple of people are really, really happy to have you in because they get to spoil those grandkids wonderfully, and that's good and right. But we are so proud of what God is doing through you guys. And if you would just gather up down here, we want to pray over you. Yes?
They said the Hungarian language is one of the most difficult languages to learn. How fluent do you think you are in that language?
I would put my level about 2 years old.
He's not just being modest in that. I think we have done intensive study. That's one thing that we were able to continue actually with the tutor during the quarantines. We're at the level where reading it is a lot easier for me. Aaron says I've always been a better student, so I think I can speak it a little bit better than him. I can read it for most parts. I can understand it a lot of the time when someone speaks to me, but it's replying in Hungarian that is a problem. It's a lot harder to speak it. But we're able to do normal daily activities now. We're able to, go to the post office, or we adopted kittens from a shelter. We did that in Hungarian. So we're able to just do normal communication in Hungarian at this point, which has been a real blessing and definitely made it feel much more like home when we're able to communicate with people.
Amen. Would you stand as we have this closing song? If you'd like to gather around the DePues as we pray for them, you're welcome to come.